Okay, this isn't the episode that I had planned to share with you today, but I am currently staying with a guy that I'm seeing, and I didn't factor in the amount of traffic that would be going past during the day, so I can't actually record what I wanted to record for you today. So this is an episode that I recorded a couple of weeks ago that was going to come out at some point in the future. It wasn't on the list to come out today, but I wanted to share this with you anyway. I wanted to make sure that an episode went out today. So I've got my backup plan. This episode is all about red flags. And before you get listening to it, I also wanted to let you know that I'm hosting a free masterclass on the 20th of March. It's called the Dating Debrief, and it's how I went from anxious, codependent, and unable to speak up in relationships to confidently dating, able to set solid boundaries, and having the time of my life. So we're going to cover a lot in this session. I've called it a masterclass, but it's not a sit down, watch a load of slides, take a load of notes type thing. It's essentially going to be like a podcast episode, really. We're going to sit there, have a chat. You'll be able to ask me questions. You'll be able to share your feedback, share your thoughts. It's going to be interactive. The vibe is going to be us sitting down and having a cup of tea while we chat about my dating and relationship history and the lessons that I've learned. And my hope for you is that you're going to come along and you're going to leave feeling a lot more confident, a lot more empowered, and more hopeful in your own dating life. So as I said, it's completely free. It's happening on the 20th of March live. If you cannot make it live, there will be a chance for you to access a replay, but I would love to see you there, because then obviously, as I said, you can ask me questions, you can get involved. I will see you there. Now let's get on to this episode that's all about red flags, and I'll be back again on Monday with an episode that was actually supposed to go out on the right day. So I will see you there. Welcome to the Date with Confidence podcast, a place to come for dating advice, support, and stories that'll either fill you with hope or relief that your dating experience wasn't as bad as it could have been. With practical episodes that'll provide you with easy to implement tips to help you feel confident AF on your next date, alongside lighthearted catch-ups where your host Rebecca, that's me by the way, shares her own experience dating after 4 years of the single life. You are guaranteed to end each episode feeling less alone in your dating struggles, empowered to never settle again, and confident that the best is yet to come. And if it all falls to shit, there's a special first season dedicated to breakups. You are welcome, my friend. Subscribe, review, and share with your single friends. Welcome back to the Date with Confidence podcast with me, Rebecca Hawkes. Today we are talking all about red flags. So I've got a selection of questions and comments that have been asked about whether something is a red flag or not. So I thought I would share my opinion on what I think and whether I would class these as red flags or whether I think it's something that the person who's asked it is maybe overthinking or being oversensitive about. Now, this is my personal opinion, but one thing that I do want to say at the start of this episode is if you think it's a red flag and it looks like a red flag and it feels like a red flag, chances are it's a fucking red flag. Okay, so I'm going to go through these questions and share my opinion, but for the most part, whenever you feel like something is a red flag, it's probably going to be a red flag. Okay, first of all, I've been speaking to a guy and I'm not sure if this is a red flag. I matched with a guy on Hinge and we totally hit it off, messaging and voice noting for hours. We've had a few long phone calls too, some lasting more than 2 hours. The banter's great, we have chemistry and both have the same sense of humour. However, a couple of times when we've been talking, he started talking about women in an absolutely disgusting way. He referred to a girl he used to know as skinny, but not sexy skinny. She looked like a starved animal. It was disgusting. Wow. Another time he described a friend's ex-girlfriend as super fat. He's spoken like this a few times now and I'm really uncomfortable with it. I don't like it when men comment on women's bodies and I don't understand how he can talk about them with so much disgust to someone that he's only just met. I really like him otherwise and he seems like a great guy apart from this. I don't know if I'm being oversensitive or if it's a red flag and I should run. Well, I Like, personally, if a guy spoke about another woman like that, it would be a massive red flag for me, because I'd be like, well, what the fuck are you saying about me? If you can talk about another woman's body like that, and you supposedly liked them, or just it doesn't even matter about liking them. If you can speak about another woman's body like that, then what's to say that you can't speak about my body? And what are you saying about my body? And what are you thinking about my body? If I was going to be intimate with a man and I already knew that he was so judgmental and critical and disgusting about somebody else's body, it would really hold me back from being intimate, because I'd feel like if I was naked, he would be judging what my body looked like. So it would be a massive issue for me. I think people can have preferences around the shape of the body that they like, around the body type, around what they find attractive. I have my preferences. I expect men have their own preferences. But if somebody has a body type that isn't your preference, that doesn't mean that you get to be nasty or rude or downright disgusting about their body. I think the issue is, and this isn't justifying the way he's talking, because we're in 2024, you should know that this kind of talk is not acceptable anymore. But I think the issue is we have and are brought up in this society where it's always been acceptable, up until very recently, as in the last couple of years, where it's always been very acceptable to talk about other people's bodies and to judge them and criticise them and give your opinions on them. And there has always been this acceptance of a certain figure, yet anything that deviates from that strict type of body type is thought of as wrong, or like skinny or fat, or just not a good body type to have, if that makes sense. So I think there's a lot of conditioning that comes into it, and why he probably doesn't see anything wrong with speaking about a woman's body like this. But for me personally, it would be a red flag, especially as if he's just met you, you'd also expect him to not be on his best behaviour, but you'd expect that he wanted to make a good impression on you if he liked you. And I'm very much about being your authentic self, and I don't believe we should wear masks, or we should try and be someone that we're not, or we should try and only show our best side when dating. But I do feel like if he is comfortable enough or doesn't see an issue with these types of comments now, when he's in the early stages of dating you or of him trying to impress you, then what else could he say when he's at that comfortable state? And I do feel like if he feels like it's acceptable to say these kinds of things about a woman's body, then I would see him as the type of person that would be comfortable criticising other aspects of a woman, which I don't agree with. Personally, I would run. It would be a red flag, unless he was the sort of person where you could bring that up and you could say, actually, the way that you're speaking about women's bodies is an issue for me, and I don't know whether you realise this, but it's quite a derogatory way to speak about a woman. If he is somebody that would be open to a conversation where you could explain why it's making you uncomfortable and why it's not okay for him to speak like that about a woman's body, and he was self-aware enough to go, oh, okay, maybe I have got it wrong, or maybe this is just how I've been conditioned and I'm willing to change, great. But I don't know that many men that would be open to such conversations, purely because if you say to someone, the way you're talking is pretty disgusting, a lot of people, and this is me completely stereotyping and generalising here, but a lot of people would have their ego hurt by that. So I would run now before you fall in love with him. Because it's much easier to escape the red flags before you get to that point. Whereas when you get to the point where your emotions are more in control, then you could just find yourself in a situation with somebody who is just not really a very nice person, to be honest. That is my opinion. And if he asks you why you're backing off or why you don't want to see him, then you can be honest about it, and you can just say, it's uncomfortable to me the way that you speak about other women's bodies. It's not something that I'm looking for. At which point he might go, oh, I didn't realise. Or he might go, well, fuck you, in which case, dodged a bullet there, love. Okay, the next one. Is it a red flag if someone unmatches you on a dating app immediately after getting your number? I mean, I don't think I would like it. I would maybe find it a little bit of a... I just don't know why they'd bother. Like, why would you go for the effort of unmatching someone? Because surely you could just then pop back up in their feeds. Or for me, I like to keep matched with someone so that I can go back to their dating profile to see the multiple pictures that are on there, because obviously with WhatsApp you only get one, and to just remind myself of what they'd put in their profile if I need to. So if I'm talking with someone on WhatsApp and then I don't remember what we spoke about before, or if I'm not really feeling the conversation, or if I'm really feeling the conversation and I want to remind myself of what they've said about themselves in their profile, I would just never bother unmatching. But then I don't bother unmatching anyone, even people that I've been on dates with and it's not worked out. I just don't think of it as being something to do. So what would be the reasoning for unmatching once they've got the number? I think this is probably a personal preference. If you would feel uncomfortable if someone unmatched you after getting your number, then it's a red flag. Red flags can be fluid. They can be different for every single person. What's a red flag for me might not be a red flag for you. And I know you get the generic ones that are absolutely red flags, like the one we just spoke about a moment ago. But ones like this, would you maybe call it a beige flag? I don't know. To me, I'd find it a bit weird, but I don't know whether it would necessarily be a big enough issue for it to bother me. You could always just ask them and say, oh, I noticed you unmatched me. Is there a reason for this, if you're that curious? But I don't think that would be a massive deal for me. However, if you do have a different opinion on that, I would love to hear your reason why it would be a red flag if someone unmatched you, because right now I can't think of why that would be a massive issue, but I'm very open to seeing and hearing lots of different perspectives, so I would happily welcome what you would have to say. So perhaps you can share that in the poll if you're listening share that in the comments if you're listening on Spotify, or you can go to datewithconfidencepodcast.com/contribute, and there is a form there where you can fill in some information, or you can answer the question that I just asked, because yeah, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Then we have this one. I've been chatting with a guy for a couple of weeks and we've already been on 3 really awesome dates. The chemistry's there, we talk for hours and have those dates that you don't want to end. We don't communicate non-stop in between dates, which is fine by me, and we've organised a 4th date for a few days' time. My issue is I noticed he'd updated his dating profile with new photos after our 3rd date. During that date, we talked about continuing to see each other and becoming intimate. I told him it might take me a little time, but I would really like to. He seems just as keen as I am, and on each date has always asked, when can I see you again? I thought it was a good sign when a guy plans the next date on the date, but now I'm worried that him updating his profile is a red flag. This sounds quite familiar. I was in a very similar situation with the Am I Delusional guy. I think it's episode 12. You can go back and listen to that. And I'd also been on a few dates with him, and I think I'd been on 2 dates and thought things were going really well, and I noticed that he'd updated his Hinge profile, but I wasn't 100% certain whether he had or whether I just hadn't realised they were the photos that had been there before. But now thinking back on it, actually I do think he had changed his profile after the 2nd or 3rd date. I personally, it's really tricky. Part of me is like, yeah, I would see it as a red flag if after date 3 he's talked about having sex with me and then gone back and updated his dating profile. However, there's also the argument that you're not exclusive, you're not a couple, you're not boyfriend and girlfriend, so he's entitled to continue dating and seeing other people. But then why update your profile? To me, that would show that he's actively looking at matching other people. Whereas if he didn't update his profile but stayed on the dating apps, then he's maybe not so fussed. But to actively change the profile shows that he would be actively looking for someone else. So then maybe that connection that you thought was there is perhaps not there. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to continue dating someone. I do think that is a bit of a red flag. Like, it's great that he's organised the next dates with you, but if he was as into you as he said he is, he wouldn't be updating his profile. I always come back to this phrase, if he wanted to, he would. And I feel like the same in this scenario. Like, if he was as invested as he said he is, he wouldn't be looking for anyone else. So to me, I hate to say it, that is a bit of a red flag. You could maybe bring it up with him and ask him if you feel like he would be honest with you. But if you think it's a red flag, if it feels like a red flag, it is a red flag. So trust your intuition on that one and decide before you become intimate with him, because what would be worse is you thinking, do you know what, I'm going to sleep with him because that will hook him in. That's not going to be the case. Okay, the next one. Is a guy being on multiple dating apps a red flag? No, I don't think so at all. I'm on 5. I don't think looking in multiple places is a bad thing. Gives you more options. Not every woman is on every dating app, so he might be on different ones because he wants to get different matches in different places. I just don't see how like spreading yourself out a bit is an issue when you are actively dating. I think it's fine. And he might just be curious like me. Like, he might just be curious about what the different apps are like. I don't see it as an issue. Not a problem for me. Okay, I've been seeing a guy for a little while now, and we recently spoke about love on one of our dates. He's been in several relationships, but he said that he didn't love any of them. I've been in the same amount of relationships, but I loved 2 of them. Is it a red flag for a guy to have been in multiple relationships and not have been in love with any of them? I think there's a few things to unpack here. First of all, I think it would depend on their age. How old are they? If you are someone in your early 20s, then great. If you're someone who's in their 40s, 50s, 60s, then maybe him not being in love could be a bit of a red flag, because it's like, well, if you've been in relationships where you've spent a lot of time with someone, if you perhaps lived with them, if they've been long-term relationships, we also don't know how long these relationships have been. If they've been a couple of months here and there, different. If you've been with someone for 5 years and you didn't love them, that might be a bit of a red flag, because it's like, are you capable of being in love? Do you know what it means to be in love? If you could be with someone for 5 years and not be in love, then what's to say that you could fall in love with me? I also think he could just be saying that he hasn't been in love because he doesn't want to admit it. There may be, if he's got low self-esteem, or if he has been in a relationship before where there's been jealousy and he's admitted to being in love before, and the person he was with didn't like the fact that he'd been in love with someone else before, maybe he thinks it's easier for me to say, no, I haven't been in love, so that you don't potentially get jealous or feel less than because he's loved someone else. Maybe he doesn't want you to bring it up further down the line that that he loved his ex. Does he love you more than he loved his ex? Because there are women that will behave in that way if they're feeling insecure, or if they've got like an anxious attachment style. They may be like, but do you love me more than X person? So he might just think it's easier to just say no, he wasn't in love, which I mean is kind of a red flag in itself, the fact that he's not being honest with you. But there's so much, like, context is everything. Is it a red flag for a guy to have been in multiple relationships and not been in love with any of them? Yes and no. We need to know more of a background. How long has he been in the relationships for? Has it just been a couple of months? How old is he? Have these relationships been back to back? Has he been in anything long term? There's so much context that's missing here, so I feel like I can't say whether it is a red flag or not. So in that scenario, you have to go with your gut. And if you think it's a red flag and it looks like a red flag and it feels like a red flag to you, it is a red flag. So you're going to have to use your own judgment in that scenario as to whether you feel like that's a big enough deal to you to end something that could have potential but also could lead nowhere. The next question, is it a red flag if a guy doesn't have social media? No. A lot of people, and I know this because I've read it online, a lot of people are like, if he doesn't have social media, it's a massive red flag. Everyone has social media nowadays. How can he not be on social media? I don't agree with that at all. I know multiple men and I've dated multiple guys that don't have social media, that aren't active on social media, and I kind of like it, to be honest. I think I would find it harder to date someone who is active on social media because I'm used to not having to deal with the scenarios of who is the guy following? Is he messaging someone else on socials? That kind of thing. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Maybe if he has 0 social media profiles, then could it? Now, am I going to change my mind now? If he's not active on social media, I like that. I like that he's not investing all that time and energy in being on socials. If he has 0 profiles across the internet anywhere, maybe it is. I don't really know, to be honest. I don't think it would bother me. If I met him in real life and got to know him personally, I don't think it would be an issue for me if he had no social media at all. I don't think I would see that as a red flag. But again, that's my judgment. I would very much judge it based on the person that I'm with, as opposed to a blanket statement of, yes, it's a red flag if they have no social media, or no, it's not. Again, it has to be your decision. Personally, it wouldn't bother me that much. Then we have, do you think it's a red flag if a guy mainly follows women on Instagram? I've been seeing someone for a little while and his Instagram following is 60 to 70% female. They're not Instagram models or influencers, just ordinary women like me. I don't know if this is a red flag or if I'm being sensitive. First of all, I'd ask why you feel like you might be being sensitive. Is this from your own personal insecurities? Is there something where you feel insecure, like you are not enough because he is following all these women? And I would also say, again, like this can vary because 60 to 70%, if he's following 100 people and there's like 60 women, that's not really that many in the grand scheme of things. Whereas if he's following like, I don't know, 1,000 people and 600 of them are women, there's a big difference between that. And I would say it really depends on a few things. It depends on the way he's engaging with these women. Is it people that he knows? Is it friends? Is it people that he went to school with? Is it people that he's had conversations with? Is he sending flirty messages? Is he sending fire emojis? Is he responding to stories? How is he engaging with the women that he's following is far more important than whether or not or why he is following these women. I would also say this would come down to trust. And I would say, how long have you been seeing them for? Do you trust this person? Because if you've been seeing someone and you trust them implicitly, who they follow online is not going to make a blind bit of difference to you. If you don't trust this person, then I would ask myself, why don't I trust this person? Is it because the way people have previously made me feel, or the experiences that I have personally lived through previously that mean I don't trust this person? Or is it because he has given me reason not to trust him, i.e. by messaging other girls, by flirting with other people in front of me, by notifications coming up on his phone, whatever, by cheating on me previously? I'd look at those two things, find out why there is a lack of trust and why this would bother you. If it is because he has given you reason not to trust him, I would say the fact that he's following these other women, then maybe it is an issue, and maybe he's somebody that you need to cut ties with now before it gets too serious. If you don't trust him because of your own past and the way that other people have treated you, then I would say get yourself some therapy, do some work on yourself to overcome that past trauma and to ensure that you're not taking those trust issues into what could become a future relationship. I've gone really around about the houses answering that, I think, but hopefully you found that helpful. I've been chatting with a guy for a couple of weeks now. We wanted to meet sooner, but I had other commitments, so we've arranged a date for next week. My concern is sometimes when I message him, the message doesn't deliver straight away. Sometimes it could be a couple of hours before it shows as 2 ticks on WhatsApp. Is this a red flag? This again sounds quite relatable to me because the guy that I was messaging, Ted, real name's not Ted obviously, but in the I Know What I Deserve Now episode, I think it's episode 20, the same thing happened with him. There would be moments where I would message and the message wouldn't deliver for ages, but he also supposedly worked in telecommunications and worked away and worked nights, so there was part of me that was like, oh, maybe his messages aren't delivering because he's busy at work or because he's somewhere where he doesn't have signal. I would be slightly dubious about the messages not delivering straight away. However, having said that, this has just made me think, I've got a group chat with a couple of my friends who I've mentioned before, like the girls that I've talked about before on the podcast. We have a group chat, and there are times where I will message the group chat and the messages won't deliver straight away to at least one of them. And I know that they're not out and about putting their phone on whatever so that the messages can't be delivered because they're like having an affair or something. Like, I know that for a fact. So again, I really think it depends on different scenarios. Do they live in the countryside? If they live in the countryside, then perhaps they just have really poor signal where they live and that's why the messages aren't delivering. Do they have a job that requires their phone to be put on airplane mode? Again, that could be why they're not delivering. I would say if it is something that is concerning you, there is no harm in bringing up that topic. I would say, oh, I've noticed that my messages don't always deliver. I wondered why that was, and see what their response is. If they get defensive, if they become cagey, if they try and gaslight you into you're being crazy, then massive red flag. If they are quite nonchalant about it and like, oh, I don't get reception when I'm in this part of the house, or I have to put my phone on airplane mode when I'm at work, or whatever the reasons are, then maybe it's less of a red flag. But again, you got to trust your intuition on this one, as with all of them. I matched with a guy on Bumble recently, and as we were chatting, we got onto the topic of how long we'd been single for. He asked me why my last relationship ended, and then I asked him. His response was quite aggressive about his ex. He said some quite nasty things about her and seemed to point the blame at her. I know I don't know their relationship, so he could be telling the truth, but relationships are made of 2 people, you know? Is it a red flag that he was so openly rude about his ex? Surely he must have had feelings for her at some point, so how can he talk about her with so much disgust to someone he doesn't know? I'm not sure if I'm just being sensitive or if this is someone I should avoid. To be honest, when a man speaks negatively about his ex, it gives me the ick a bit. Because I think regardless of the way that they've treated you, something would have been there. You would have had feelings for her or them. You would have had feelings for them. You would have cared for them at some stage for them to be an ex. You're not just with someone because you don't care about them. So when somebody talks negatively about an ex, regardless of what the situation was, and it's not even negatively, I think you can talk about someone and an experience you've had in a negative way without being nasty or malicious or spiteful about it. I think you can fact state and you can say, this is what happened, this is why we split up. But when you bring in things like, oh, she was a psycho, or fuck her, like, it's an ick for me. I don't like it. If you've watched Sex and the City, you'll have seen the episode where Berger gets a voicemail from his ex. She leaves a voicemail on his answer phone, and he sticks his middle fingers up at her, or he sticks his middle fingers up at the answer phone, and Carrie's like, what the actual fuck was that? That's how I feel when a guy slags off his ex in a really negative way, in a malicious way. So to me, it would be a little bit of a red flag, because I'm like, if you can talk about somebody that you supposedly cared about in such a nasty way, what's to say that you wouldn't suddenly turn on me if things didn't go to plan with me? And I think as well, having been on the receiving end of the opposite, when I was talking to I Know What I Deserve Now guy, when I spoke to him about his ex, he was actually really nice. He was like, oh, we just drifted apart. We just fell out of love with each other. Nothing bad happened, but we were just not compatible anymore. It was really refreshing to hear that perspective, or to hear him talk about his ex in a kind way, because I thought no matter what's gone on between you, you've still got the respect to talk about the end of the relationship nicely. So yeah, I don't think you're being sensitive. It is something that would be an issue for me and would bother me as well. Why did he lie about the number of people he slept with, and is this a red flag? I've been speaking to someone who I felt a real connection with for the first time since I left a relationship where my ex cheated on me. Because of my past, I know I have trust issues. When talking to this guy, I asked how many people he'd been with, and at first he said 4, but when I told him I'd only been with 2 people, he changed his answer to 56. 56? Fucking hell. I made a joke out of there being a big difference between 4 and 56, and he blamed his neurodiversity for the impulsive first answer. He acknowledged how that must have looked and felt to me, and apologised immediately. I don't know whether I'm being sensitive or whether it's a red flag that he lied to me first of all. First of all, I do feel like a lot of the questions that have been asked, people are like, women in particularly are like, am I being sensitive? And I'm so sick of us being labelled with this sensitive label. Our feelings and our emotions and the way that we react to something isn't sensitive. If that is a feeling and an emotion that you have to a situation, you're not being oversensitive, you're having a human reaction. And I'm sick of being told that our reactions are us being too sensitive or overreacting. That's bollocks. We are allowed to feel, and we are allowed to have the reactions that we have. We are allowed to have the emotional response that we have. We are not being fucking sensitive. And that's not having a go at the person that wrote this question. That is just, I'm so over it. Yes, we can be reactive, and we can have reactions that perhaps on reflection might feel like they've been blown out of proportion, but we're not being sensitive because we have an emotional reaction to something. So your emotional reaction to this person changing their mind about how many people they've slept with isn't you being oversensitive, it is you having that human reaction. So don't ever beat yourself up for what people consider being sensitive. You're not sensitive. You are just a human being. Is it a red flag that he lied to me? Yes, I mean, any lying full stop I think is a red flag. I think what's good about it is the fact that he has immediately acknowledged the way that that would have made you feel, and he has apologised for it. I think we can all make mistakes, and we can all say things impulsively, and I know that this is a fact with the neurodivergent community, myself being ADHD as well. I know that sometimes we can say things and be like, oh, actually, I didn't mean that. I don't know where that's come from. It just comes out. So I think the fact that he has acknowledged the impulsivity and he has apologised for it is a good sign. I do think it's weird that that's such a big difference. And I also think when it comes to people that you've slept with, I mean, I've always been honest about it, but there is this theory that when a man is asked how many people he slept with, he will inflate that number to be seen as more of a stud, whereas when a woman is asked how many people she has slept with, it's believed that a woman will lower the number of actual people she slept with in order to not come across as a, for want of a better word, slut or whatever. So I don't know whether this guy's perhaps done that, whether he's maybe inflated his number or whether he is like genuinely being honest. I don't know. Maybe it was the impulsive thing, maybe it was his neurodiversity, maybe he just didn't want to be completely honest with you because he felt like his number was really big. But I also don't understand why it would have been a lower number, and then when you said you'd only slept with 2 people, he would suddenly go to a much bigger number, because surely he wouldn't want to inflate it that much if you hadn't slept with that many people. I don't know. It would be something that would bother me, because I think if you can lie about that, what else could you lie about throughout the relationship? However, I also think we do have to recognise the neurodiversity and what he said about that and how he has been upfront. And if he is somebody who is going to say things impulsively, but then recognise he's done it and apologise, I think you have to give him grace for that. And I think that that's fine. If he recognises, oh shit, I didn't mean to say that, I'm really sorry, I understand that would have made you feel bad, that is okay. But again, it's all down to personal preference. Are you somebody who, now he's lied about that one thing, are you then going to spend the rest of the time together that you're speaking with them? It also says that you've been speaking to him. It doesn't say that you've been dating them. So have you even met this person yet? If you haven't met this person yet, I would just call it quits now before you start to get emotionally involved, personally. But if you are somebody who is already struggling with trust issues and is already concerned about the fact that he has lied about this, chances are you're going to spend so much time thinking every time he answers one of your questions, well, has he told the truth or has he just been impulsive again? And that's not a healthy way to live your life. So personally, in this instance, I would call things quits before you get too involved. But we've just got a couple more. I've been talking to a guy for almost 3 months. There are moments where he stops replying out of nowhere, or he stopped replying at 7 p.m. but texted me the next day saying he fell asleep. I really like him, but this behaviour bothers me. So I texted him last week after a night out to tell him that it bothers me how on some days he's really into me, then other days I feel like I don't exist. This was a week ago and he hasn't responded to my message, but today he unfollowed me on Instagram. Should I message him again, or should I see this as a red flag and move on? Don't message him again. Sack him off. You've been talking to him for 3 months. Again, it doesn't say whether you've been dating or not. I would say it doesn't matter whether you've actually been seeing each other or not. If he is not making you feel important or special or like you matter, and he's being very like all in or all out of his communication, he's not into you. He is just not that into you, which is probably going to suck to hear. But why waste your time on somebody who is not communicating with you in the way that you want to be communicated with? Like, no, it's been 3 months. Sack him off right now. He unfollowed you. He's definitely not interested. He hasn't liked being called out on his behaviour. He could have somebody else. He could be dating somebody else. He could have a girlfriend. Who the fuck knows? Is it really important? No, it's not. This is a red flag. Move on now before you become more emotionally invested, because this is not... Like, honestly, is this somebody that you want to invest more time with? Is this somebody that you want to invest your time and your energy in whether it's messaging or dating? Like, if he wanted to, he would. If he was interested in you, he would communicate with you consistently. He's just not. He's not. Sack him off, move on. You deserve better. Raise those standards. Talking of raising standards, I actually have an entire lesson inside the confidence course that is dedicated to you raising your relationship standards. And if you are somebody who is settling for the bare minimum, then I would highly encourage you to check out the confidence course, because it is going to help you not only raise your standards in your relationships, but it's going to help you set boundaries. It's going to help you increase your self-confidence so that you stop settling for these bullshit men who are just not worth your fucking time. Okay, hang on. I feel like I got really ranty there, but it really frustrates me the number of women I see who are consistently accepting bottom of the barrel men who are not treating you the way that you deserve to be treated. All these red flags. And people are like, is it a red flag? I'm just not sure. It's a fucking red flag. And the thing is, if you had more self-confidence, if your self-esteem was higher, and you were more self-assured, you wouldn't even question these things. These wouldn't even be questions that you would be asking, because you would see it for what it is and you would go straight away, I deserve more than that. I am worthy of more. My standards are higher. I'm going to leave now. And I don't know, it upsets me sometimes that so many people are happy to settle for so little. And I understand those reasonings, because I've been there. I've been the one who's like, oh, I'll just accept these breadcrumbs, or I'll accept these micro affections, or I'll accept this one thing that he's done well and ignore the other 50 times that he's gaslit me or made me feel bad or treated me like shit. I've been in that position, and I've had the low self-esteem where I've been willing to accept, as I said, bottom of the barrel behaviour. No more. Absolutely no fucking more. And I really want you to be the same. I really want you to recognise how much you have to offer someone. I want you to recognise how valuable you are. I want you to feel so fucking confident in yourself that the second a red flag appears in your face, you go, no, you're not for me. See you later. And you can become that person with the confidence course. So you can check that out in the show notes if you feel inclined to. Okay, the last two. If a guy has slept with a lot of women, is it a red flag? I've recently started dating a guy who told me he slept with a lot of women, brackets close to 100, and I'm not sure if this is a red flag or not. My personal opinion is no. If a guy has slept with a lot of women, it does not bother me in the slightest. I personally would rather a man that has had more experience, whether that be experience in multiple long-term relationships or whether that be experience as in he's slept around. I would rather that than somebody who has slept with maybe one person and doesn't have a lot of experience, because I feel like the sex would be better with someone who has more experience. Maybe that's me being naive. Maybe he could just have had like 100 one-night stands and be shit at all of them. But my personal opinion is that if he's slept around a lot, he is likely going to be better in bed, and I prefer that. So it's not really a red flag for me. If a guy hasn't had a relationship, that to me is more of a red flag than if he slept with a lot of women. So if a guy is in his 30s or 40s and he hasn't had a long-term relationship at all, that to me is a bit more of a, I'd be a bit more dubious about that, because I'm like, well, why have you not at least experienced one relationship? So yeah, to me, sleeping with a lot of women isn't a red flag. But again, it's personal preference. If you don't like the fact that he has been with that many women and it's going to cause problems or it's going to make you feel insecure, then there are two ways you can go about that. You can sack him off now, or you can work on why it makes you feel insecure, him having been with that many women. To me, I'm not insecure about the fact that he's been with that many women. It doesn't affect my own sense of self-esteem, self-confidence, whatever. It just doesn't bother me either way, because I also am like, I know I'm not going to be comparing myself to all the 100 women that he slept with, or I'm not going to think, oh, is he comparing me to someone else? I couldn't care less. The last one, I have been seeing someone for a month or two now and taking it pretty slow as he's very newly single. Neither of us are seeing anyone else, but I mentioned I was out for a drink. I mentioned I was out for a few drinks after work, and then asked And then he asked me if I was going to be on the pool. I can't tell if he's just being silly and joking or being serious. Is this a red flag or am I reading into it too much? He could be asking you because maybe he's insecure or he's trying to gauge whether or not you're dating other people, but he doesn't want to ask you outright because he doesn't want to be seen as maybe possessive or jealous, or maybe he doesn't want to let you know how into you he is, so he puts on this little joke. That could be the case. When I was dating the guy who lied to me, which I think is episode 22, you can listen to that story there. When I was dating him, he used to ask me all the time about, did I have any dates planned? Had I kissed on the first date? Had I met someone else? And I did find it a bit weird, especially before we met, but then after we'd met and we'd been on that first date, and I knew that I got the impression that he had low self-esteem and was insecure. I saw that the reason he was asking me those things is because he wanted reassurance, perhaps, that he was the only person that I was seeing. Unless it was a bit of a fetish and he just liked the idea of me dating other people, but I didn't get that vibe from him. I think it could perhaps come from a insecure place. It could be that he's jealous. It could be that he is just trying to gauge how you feel about him. So I wouldn't take it as a red flag as such. But then if you've been seeing him and it's going quite well, I would be open with him and I'd be honest and I would say, why are you asking me that? Or would that be an issue? Or like bring it up in conversation and just say, oh, when you asked me that, I didn't know whether you were joking or whether you were being serious. Why did you ask me that question? And then you can get the response from there. I think open communication is so important, and I don't think enough of us are confident enough to ask those questions, because we feel like if we ask a question, then that person might run away, or they might accuse us of being psycho, or they might gaslight us or whatever. But one thing that I repeatedly try and remind myself is something that my friend said to me a while ago. She said you can never say the wrong thing to the right person. So if you ask someone a question just to clear up any miscommunication, or if you're concerned about something and their response is aggressive or defensive or gaslighting you, or they start teasing you about it, they're the wrong person in the first place. Whereas if you ask someone a question and they can communicate openly with you, then they are the right person. Does that make sense? So I would just ask the question. I don't know if it's necessarily a red flag, to be perfectly honest. Maybe he was just trying to gauge where you were at, but didn't want to openly ask you that for whatever reason. I really hope you have enjoyed this episode. I have very much enjoyed going through all these red flags. It's so interesting because a lot of red flags I see or a lot of comments and questions and things that I read, questions that I'm asked, we can all relate. I feel like we can all relate to these scenarios. There's a couple of scenarios, as I said, when we were going through these questions, there were a couple of scenarios that I really related to in my own dating life. So I hope that you have found this helpful in some way. And even if you didn't get the direct answer that you were looking for, I hope it's encouraged you to trust your intuition, to be able to coach yourself through these questions that you have yourself. And just as one last reminder, if you think it's a red flag, if it looks like a red flag, if it feels like a red flag to you, it is a red fucking flag. And go find someone else. I really don't think it's worth clinging on to somebody who is a walking red flag just because you might have some feelings for them in those initial stages. If there are red flags in the initial stages, run for the hills now before you end up getting hurt. There is an amazing guy waiting for you who isn't full of red flags. He is out there. You deserve him. Don't settle for anyone who is causing you to question things, who is causing you concern, who is a walking red flag. You deserve the world. Know that for a fact. Okay? If you want to contribute your red flags to the Date with Confidence podcast, if you want to ask for my advice, if you've got any questions, you want to share your dating stories, anything at all, go to datewithconfidencepodcast.com/contribute. And I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for listening to the Date with Confidence podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Subscribe, rate and review, and share it with your single friends.